Hey everyone, and welcome to our March mid-month wrap-up. March so far has been a bit of an odd reading month. We've read more books in this time period than we normally have by the middle of a month, but we actually decided to read all 12 of the World Book Day books in 2 days. So considering we've read 16 books so far in March, 12 of them were this short, and we read them in 2 days. Which means, really, we've got 4 books to talk to you about today, because we have already kind of wrapped these up in our World Book Day reading vlog. So I will link that down in the description. If you skip to the second part of the video, I'll find the timestamp for it and put it down below. You can get our thoughts on all of these. So we're not going to share our thoughts on them again today, but I will just read out the titles for you so you know what to expect in there. They are There's a Wolf in Your Book by Tom Fletcher, Luna Loves World Book Day by Joseph Colo and Fiona Lumbers, The What the Ladybird Heard story play by Julia Donaldson and Lydia Monks, Gigantosaurus Dino Spot by Johnny Doddle, The River Whale by Sita Brack-Macari, Skullduggery Pleasant Apocalypse Kings by Derek Landy, Sky Steppers by Catherine Rundell, Protect the Planet by Jess French, Football School 20 Fantastic Football Stories by Alex Bellos and Ben Littleton, Killjoy by Holly Jackson, Planet Omar Operation Kind by Zainab Mian, and Little Bad Man and the Radioactive Samosa by Hamza Arshad and Henry White. So those were the first 12 books that we finished in the month, and as I said, we have already wrapped those up. So today we're going to be talking about 4 books with you, which means it's been a bit of a poor reading month. I was back at work for a few days. There's been some stuff going on that I don't know if I can talk about with you yet. So there will be an update coming at some point, but there's some stuff going on in the background that's been kind of putting me off of reading. Mental health all over the place, very wacky. Some days I'm really great, some days I'm just sobbing on the stairs so hard that I can hardly even breathe, which is always grand. But yes, so reading has not gone well. We are about a quarter of the way through The Shadow Rising by Robert Jordan, but normally we read 3 chapters of that in the morning and then read another book, and we've been taking all day to read the 3 chapters. I don't know if that's because it's slow or because my concentration is shot, but yeah, we will hopefully get that finished by the end of the month. And I'm also reading Crossed by Ali Conde at the moment, which I should hopefully finish by the end of the month. But yes, considering it's the 15th of March, we've currently finished 4 full-length books, one of which was The Case of the Drowned Pearl by Robin Stevens, which also doesn't really count as full-length because this was a World Book Day book from last year. But it's fine, it's fine. So I will start off by telling you about the first book that I finished this month, and that was The Boy I Am by K.L. Kettle. Now this is K.L. Kettle's debut novel. It came out in January and I featured it in the book birthday party that month. This follows a boy called Jude. He is part of the House of Boys, and in the House of Boys you have to compete for attention of the women who have the money, because they can employ you to do jobs and things, and that's how you get your income. It's a dystopian, and it's very, very clever because it kind of flips gender on its head entirely. So every position of power in this world is a position of power that's held by a woman. All of the police are women. All of the slaves, kind of the servants, the very lower people in society, all of them are the men. All men are born with a debt, and it's based off of the debt that was accrued by the man with the name before you. So, for example, there was a guy called Jude many years ago who would have accrued his debt, and that has been passed down to the Jude that we are following. And every guy throughout their life, when they do something wrong, they get more added onto their debt. If they do something right, or if they gain money through working for these women, it gets taken away from their debt. But it means that it's basically impossible to ever get out of that red area. I don't think there are any guys in the entire novel that are above that line, so they're all in debt and don't really accrue any of their own possessions or any of their own money. I'm gonna say, I think this is one that I will love on a reread. It took me so much effort to try and get my head around what was going on. I think K.L. Kettle does something very, very clever. She just throws you into a story. So you meet Jude as he's planning to kill somebody called the Chancellor. He's competing for the attention. He's all dressed up, performing. He's up on the stage, and they're doing this auction where you can bid for the boys. And he has decided that he wants to get the Chancellor to bid on him, and when he gets bought by her, he will kill her in revenge for something that's happened in the previous year. And I loved that. It was so gripping, but I was just completely bamboozled and I didn't know where I was. I didn't really know what was going on. It took me until about halfway through the book to work out whether I was enjoying it or not. And then the second half was just a breeze. I'm kind of hoping that this ends up becoming part of a series, because there are so many little things about this world and about the history of the world that are crafted and really subtly weaved into the story, but they're not fully explored. So there is a lot of potential with this world, and there's a lot of potential with this story in the future. Whether it ends up being expanded remains to be seen, but I will be snapping these books up, because I think once you get your head around the structure of this world and the way that this world works, it's just brilliant. It's such a clever commentary on the way that society views women, and the way that putting a man into that position feels so wrong. It's so jarring and grating, and you're like, oh my God, why are they bidding on boys? Like, why are they treating them like commodities? But in reality, that is the way that a lot of women are treated. Like, they are just something that can be bought off. Like, they are something that you can easily own and control. And I think it's such a clever observation, and especially in YA, because it will make both male readers and female readers look at the world around them completely differently, and it will flip everything that they can see on its head. But I also just found it very, very hard to get into and hard to fully absorb myself in the story. I do think that on a reread it would be a more enjoyable experience, because I've got my head around the world now, but it means I lost a lot of the story at the beginning because I was focusing on the logistics, on the way that the world worked and the rules that were put in place in this story, and I didn't really feel as connected to the character because my brain was kind of more focused on that. I think if I'd just gone with the flow and thought, oh, I'll get it eventually, I would have enjoyed it more. But I've got one of those brains that likes to get the rules in place so that I know what's going on in the context of how it's happening. But that's just kind of a personal preference thing. I gave The Boy I Am either 4 or 4.5 stars. I'm going to have to just quickly look it up because I can't remember. But it's one of those ones that it's not quite a 5. But even though I didn't understand everything that was going on, it still had such an impact on me, and I still really was interested in this story and in this world. And especially as somebody who loves YA dystopians but doesn't find ones that are unique that often, this definitely hits that nail on the head. The Boy I Am. The Bot. Thank you, phone. That's definitely what I'm trying to look at. The Bot I Am. I gave it a 4 star. So, yes, this is one of those ones that I think it could easily end up bumping up if I reread it, but very promising and a brilliant debut, and I'm looking forward to reading more of K.R. Kettle's writing in the future. The next book that we read in February was The Case of the Drowning Pearl by Robin Stephens. This is the World Book Day short story that comes between Top Marks for Murder and Death Set Sail, and because we are planning on reading Death Set Sail this month, we thought we would read this one. I actually took this from a 5 star down to a 4 star because I think on a second read it's a bit too rushed, and I know obviously it's a short story so it should be rushed, but this has the potential for being a great mystery, but there's a lot of quite heavy-handed foreshadowing because you need to put clues to the story so that the audience can work it out, but there's also not a lot of pages for them to work it out in. It's one of those ones that with Robin Stephens, I don't often remember who the culprit is, but with this one I figured it out the first time within a couple of chapters, and I figured it out, like I could remember when I picked it up. As soon as I started the story I was like, oh yeah, I know who did it. And that's why this one's probably my least favourite out of all of them, but it's still got a 4, so that's still brilliant. And I'm really looking forward to reading Death Set Sail, and I think that might be what I need to kind of get me out of this potential reading slump, because Robin Stephens, I can just fly through all of her books, and this was like a nice little palate cleanser because we have been reading some heavier stuff around this one. The next book I'd like to talk about is The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett. Now, this was an extremely hyped release from last year. It won the historical prize for the Goodreads Reader's Choice Awards, and I don't read a lot of historical fiction, so I wasn't sure how I was going to get on with it, but I actually ended up loving it. This follows 2 sisters called Desiree and Stella, and they leave their hometown. They go to like make a life for themselves, but one morning Desiree wakes up and Stella has gone. And Desiree searches for Stella, but she can't find her, and she's not quite sure where her sister is. And then you discover that Stella has actually decided to give up her black identity and has started passing as white. So she passed as white to get employment in a fancy shop thing, I think, or like an office. I'm not sure. She's doing like reception work because she has to do typing, but it's in like this fancy like a department store, like in like the upper levels. And she ends up getting into a relationship with her boss, who obviously thinks that she is white, and they get married and they have a child. And this, it's like a multi-generational story, because while you're also following Stella and Desiree when they decide to leave home and when Stella makes that choice, you're also following Desiree's daughter Jude and Stella's daughter Kennedy as they connect by accident. They meet completely unplanned, but Jude figures out who Kennedy is, and you follow them as they meet, and as Jude has to debate with herself whether to break the news about Stella's identity to her daughter or whether to just let Stella go. It's a very emotional read. It's a very poignant and powerful read. I loved basically all of it apart from the ending. I gave this one 4.5 stars. The ending was very abrupt and it was not what I was hoping for. I thought that there were aspects of it that were brave because the story ends... There's a chance at a reunion and for all the loose ends to get tied up, but Brit Bennett makes the choice, instead of tying everything up neatly and making this a happy ending and a really complete story, there are still a lot of ends that are kind of trading off, and I think that's a very brave choice because it's very realistic. And I think even down to like the little things that go on in the background. So there's references to Martin Luther King Jr. being killed. There are references to the AIDS epidemic in America. And those are the things that really make a novel feel realistic, is when you're not just saying it is set in this time period because this is going on. You are focusing so intensely on that character's life, and they are mentioning those little news stories going on in the background to give it the context, because people who were alive back then would be thinking about those things. They would be talking about those stories because they would have a huge impact on them. And just the little things like that made this such a well-crafted, multi-dimensional world. I don't know exactly, like multi-layered. I'm trying to think of a word for it. Again, with the brain not doing the best at the moment. But yes, this was one of those stories that I didn't know if I'd love it, and I did. And I'm looking forward to reading more of Brit Bennett's writing in the future. There is a character called Reese, and I think his inclusion was brilliant. Trying not to give too much away there, because that was a surprise inclusion that I wasn't expecting, that really deepened my enjoyment of the story a lot more. So I'll try and let that lie, because I just wasn't expecting it, because everybody's been talking about the fact that this is like black sisters and one of them decides to be white, and then about their family in the future. But there's a lot more going on to this story than just that, and I think this could be a new favourite author for me. And the last book I'd like to talk about so far that I've read in March is How to Disappear by Gillian McAllister. So this focuses on a girl called Zara. She lies in a court case, and her court case gets thrown out because she's lied, and the people who were going to be prosecuted decide to create a group to hunt her down. So because she was under 16, I believe, she had the name Girl A instead of using her own name, and she was completely kept anonymous. Her identity wasn't revealed, but they decide to track her down, find out who she is, and then get their revenge for her lies. So her and her mother have to go into witness protection. They leave behind her stepfather and his daughter, his biological daughter, and the story follows the four of them. You get multiple perspective chapters, so you read from Poppy, Lauren, Aidan and Zara as they go into witness protection and how the people left behind deal with that. I don't know how to say this nicely. This was one of the most hyped thrillers that was released in 2020, and I hated it. It was a 2-star for me. I think that the concept is brilliant. The idea of these characters going into witness protection and leaving half of their family behind because of the intricate nature of family. The fact that Poppy still lives with her mother, but Aidan is obviously Poppy's father, even though he's remarried and has a new family. The discussion about that and the intricacies of family and how it can impact people's decisions, that was all very strong. I loved the use of setting, because Lauren and Zara go to the Lake District, and there's a lot of descriptions about how it's really quiet and dark late at night, because they used to live in London where there's always kind of lights on and people around, and there's always some kind of street noise going on, so it doesn't feel as secluded or abandoned as the Lake District does. So the way that that change in setting raises the tension level is brilliant. but I just thought it was all a bit far-fetched. The ending is ridiculous. The last 2 chapters ruined the story for me. I thought it was going to be on course for like a 3 or a 4, because even though it was a bit wild and wacky, it wasn't bad. But then the way that the story ended, I hated it. I thought it was so predictable. I saw it coming from a mile away. I was like, oh, I bet that's going to be what happens, isn't it? Yeah, it was. And it's one of those books that it tries to do like a twist on a twist on a twist, and none of them are surprising because it's so obvious that that is how it's going to play out. There's also a relationship between Zara and the boy who lives next door, which is just like the cringiest insta-love ever. He's like, I have a guitar and I like to sit in the music room alone. Would you like to come and sit in the music room with me? And she's like, I don't even know if I'm going to your school yet, but yes, I'd love to. You don't even know if you're going to his school yet. And then she has to leave him behind. And her mum's just like, oh, he might come and live with us. You've known him for 2 weeks. You've had to leave him behind because of all this crazy shenanigans that's going on. And now your mum's like, he's going to come live with us. She's so in love with him, even though she's known him for 2 weeks, that he's going to come and live with us. What? That's not the way that real people function. Like, teen relationships can be intense and serious, but I don't think they can be quite that intense and serious that quickly. Like, yes, I've known you for 2 weeks. You don't even know my real name because I'm a witness protection, but please come and live with me and my family. I don't get it. And that's not even really a spoiler because it's such a minor thing, but it annoyed me so much. I just couldn't. And I don't know how this is getting such rave reviews, because it's basically like How Not to Disappear. Like, they leave and then they just keep like contacting home. And the witness protection people are like, if you contact anybody from your old life, we cannot protect you anymore. So they keep contacting them and then they keep being like, yeah, we can carry on protecting you. I don't get it. That being said, I liked Gillian McAllister's writing. I think that the story was the problem. The story was just so far-fetched and I just couldn't get on board with it. But I did actually really like her writing style. The beginning was slow AF. So you start off with a prologue from Lauren applying for a new job saying she isn't Lauren anymore, she's got a new identity. And then you like jump back in time to like, will they, won't they go into witness protection? Well, yeah, we already know they do because we already know Lauren's got a new identity in the first chapter. So that whole thing was just a mess. That was very slow, very boring. But I read, I think 50% in like a night because it gets really gripping really quickly and then you literally cannot put it down. But then the ending just fell apart and ruined it for me again. So this was one that it was like a 2-star and I nearly DNF'd it. And then it went to like a 4-star and then it ended up being a 2-star again. So it was an enjoyable read, but for somebody who's having a bit of a struggle even getting into books at the moment, it wasn't what I needed. It was just far too slow. But yes, those are the 4 books and the other 12 books that we have read so far in March. Hopefully the second half of the month will be a bit more productive because it feels like we've done nothing. But then mental health stuff, you're allowed to have time off, you're allowed to relax, and I need to learn how to let myself do that. I hope you enjoyed this video, even if it did get a little bit ranty. If you would like to share any of the books that you've read this month so far, please leave a comment down below. And we will see you again soon, posting new videos every Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday. So if you just pop back, there'll be new content at some point. Hope you enjoyed this and I'll see you again. Bye! Kind of like a reunion, and for all the loose ties to be, like, and all the loose ends to be tied up. It shouldn't be that hard to say.